Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage IAC Chair Dave McClure.
Good evening. Thank you, Keisha. That was the best voice of God I've heard in a long time. I want to welcome everyone here tonight on behalf of ACT-IAC. I'm Dave McClure. I'm the executive chair of IAC. Margie Graves is here tonight, but she has gone through one commute of hell, so I'm told her that she can remain seated. But Margie has played a tremendous role for us for the big part of the year as the ACT president. And Soraya Correa, who is our new president on the ACT side, will be joining us tomorrow. And I welcome you on behalf of all three of us, actually. I want to ask a question. How many of you here in the room tonight are attending MOC for the very first time? Raise your hand. Wow. So what I would like for all of the existing ACT-IAC members to do is to shower these people with love. That can come in many forms. Drink tickets are quite popular in that area, I might add. Listen, this is a great organization, and we've done some great things in the last 12 months. I've been honored to be president of ACT and IAC ACT, and I'm glad that we've done some really groundbreaking things in cyber, in modernization, in FITARA, in Section 809 DoD procurement reform, in acquisition reform in general, in customer experience. I mean, the list goes on. This is an association, folks, especially for you newcomers that are here, where government and industry truly come together and build a common platform of understanding and mutual agreement on how we can solve the problems of the public sector. So it's a great, great association to be part of. I welcome you all here tonight to be part of the dialogue for the next day and a half, and we have quite a lineup for you. I'd like to also mention that the folks that are responsible for putting this on behind the scenes have done a great job, and I would like to give a round of applause to Keisha and her team that have actually done this. You know, if any of you have ever been in a position of putting a conference together and actually pulling it off, it is full of nightmares. There are fun times, but there are stressful times as well. So doing one of these conferences is a big task. And I use that as an opening to introduce to you this year's conference chairs, because they've put a lot of time, a lot of personal effort, and they have really leaned heavily upon some great groups of volunteers to help them as well. So I'd like to welcome to the stage this year's MOC chairs for industry and government, Mitzi Mead and Jonathan Albaum.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mitzi Mead, and you know it's going to be a great conference when cloud computing wins the Preakness last night.
And I'm Jonathan Albaum, and we are your industry and government chairs for Management of Change 2017. And we would like to formally welcome you here to the Hyatt in Cambridge, Maryland. This year's theme is Bridging Government and Business. We chose this theme because bringing industry best practices to government is a top priority for this administration. And one of the key goals of ACT-IAC is to foster communication and collaboration between government and industry. During this conference, we're hoping for productive dialogue that promotes more efficient and effective government. We want to educate you on pressing issues and promote the exchange of creative ideas to help solve our government's challenges. We've seen a lot of change over the last few months, and we've asked our friends at Government Matters to put together a short video to remind us of some of the changes that have already impacted our community.
From Washington, D.C. and around the world, this is Government Matters with Francis Rose.
Thanks for watching this special edition of Government Matters from the 37th Annual Management of Change Conference. I'm Francis Rose.
And I'm Colby Hocknew. For government, the industry that serves it, and the journalism community that reports on it, 2017 is off to a blistering start.
We took a look through our TV archives, and here are just a few of the highlights.
What this hiring memo does is it tells every federal agency in the executive branch that they have to stop hiring. It gives agency heads the authority to exempt some positions if those positions are either public safety related or if they are national security related.
It's more of a pause than a freeze is the way I would describe it, that this is going to allow the new administration an opportunity to assess what's there as their team comes in over the next 90 days.
A cut of the size that the Trump administration proposed, about 10% of the non-defense discretionary side of the budget, means a cut in the workforce of probably around 2%. That's as big a cut as been contemplated a long time.
They are trying to free some of the restrictions and the regulations. They're suggesting that maybe the 25-point plan is not the way to go. They want to let managers manage.
And from a contractor point of view, I think you got to be generally pleased with it because it's going to represent a pretty significant shift of funding from civilian agencies to defense agencies, which largely spend a lot more on contractors than civilian counterparts do.
When you look at the Office of American Innovation, there's an opportunity for them to create an organization that has extreme impact. But in order to do that, they're going to need three things. They're going to need a team with the right skills. They're going to need a precision approach for implementation. And they're going to need a management system to ensure success.
I think for this to be successful, we're going to need to bring the executive branch, the legislative branch, and all of the other stakeholders together to come up with a plan on, can we actually make the government more efficient, more effective, deliver first-class services to citizens?
You're right, Francis. Every administration has tried this, and I want to applaud the Trump administration for taking this on. But I think it's important to learn a little bit more about this effort. How are they staffing it? What issues they're going to focus on? And whether this is a genuine effort or the concern that some have raised that this might be a ruse for breaking down government more, for outsizing more. But I'm encouraged by what I've seen so far.
Pleased to have this guidance so quickly right after the executive order and the freeze memorandum. What this does is take both of those and combine them in a very thoughtful way to say that as you think about the organization of the future, what its mission will be, how it will be designed, then you think along with that about the appropriate staffing to make sure you can successfully accomplish that mission.
I was really happy to see a lot of the organization, the acknowledgement of the risk-based approach to cybersecurity and the like. Frankly, 11 reports, there's a lot of reports that have already been done, and I'm hoping that with that 6-month time frame, they're going to be referring back to the work that's already been done, updating them, and then moving ahead with velocity and precision.
I think that it translates with the FATARA rule that now accountability goes from top all the way to the bottom.
In times of change, the management of change is more important than ever. The work you do in the months and years ahead could impact government and the people it serves for generations to come.
That's why ACT-IAC brings this group together to make connections and build consensus so government can provide the best value and meet the diverse needs of its citizens now and in the future.
So, welcome to MLC 2017 and enjoy the conference. I'm Colby Hocknew.
And I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching.
So thank you to Government Matters and Francis Rose, who's in our crowd tonight, for that look back. A lot's happened in just the first 4 months of the administration. So as Dave said, running one of these conferences is never an easy task. And we knew that we couldn't do it alone. So Mitzi and I engaged the ACT-IAC communities of interest like never before. These COIs produce much of ACT-IAC's intellectual capital. So it's natural for us to ask them to support MOC. We greatly appreciate their enthusiasm and help with this conference.
And the real work begins tomorrow. We're going to start the day with a plenary actually moderated by Jonathan, to discuss FY 17 and 18 initiatives. Afterwards, you'll have a lot of choices. There are going to be 12 sessions. Some of the topics of these sessions include IT modernization, shared services, cloud migration, workforce management, data center optimization, digital enablement, customer experience, artificial intelligence, biometrics, acquisition, and telecommunications. Our luncheon topic will be innovation, and in the afternoon, there will be another plenary where CFOs discuss their challenges. On Tuesday, we'll have a CXO roundtable event that promotes discussions and interactions between government and industry. That's what this conference is about. Afterwards, there will be a plenary on innovation and procurement, and then government will get the chance to talk among themselves at the government-to-government session. And none of this would have been possible without the volunteers, the hard work of the volunteers of the Management of Change Planning Committee. They've spent months, and I've been with them, and so has Jonathan, putting together a superb conference, and we'd like to take this time to thank all of them. So can I get the volunteers for the Planning Committee and the COIs to please stand so we can give them a round of applause? Thank you, guys. In addition, we'd like to thank our vice chairs, Will Graves and Pat Crovo. Let's give them a round of applause, please, and thank the whole team. Come on, Pat.
So over the next 3 days, we encourage you to participate and share what you're learning through the mock app. Through this app, you can share the key insights, ideas, and solutions that come out of our sessions. We'll be tracking participation in the app and regularly highlighting our top contributors in the MOC app leaderboard. So please keep the comments, photos, and aha moments coming. I now have the pleasure of asking Cynthia Shelton from CenturyLink to come to the stage to introduce tonight's keynote speaker.
All right. Good evening. Josh Linkner, who started his career as a jazz guitarist, personifies creativity, entrepreneurship, and disruptive innovation. He has been the founder and CEO of 4 tech companies, which sold for a combined value of $200 million. Josh is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Disciplined Dreaming, A Proven System to Drive Breakthrough Creativity, and The Road to Reinvention, How to Drive Disruption and Accelerate Transformation. He is also the founding partner of Detroit Venture Partners, investing in and mentoring over 100 startups. Josh has twice been named the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year and is a President Barack Obama Champion of Change Award recipient. He is a regular columnist for Forbes, the Detroit Free Press, and Inc. magazine. His work on innovation has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, CNN, the New York Times. And yes, he still plays a mean jazz guitar. For more information, please visit joshlinkner.com. Please join me in welcoming Josh Linkner.
Well, good evening. So we have this government industry partnership thing. Is it okay if we still have some fun tonight? All right, that's the mission. And at the same time, our mission is going to be how we can continue to help each other, how we can continue to rise and better serve our communities, how we can harness innovation and inject some fresh thinking to achieve better outcomes. Specifically, we're going to touch on some fresh approaches, how you can inject innovation, growth, creativity ultimately to yield transformation, whether you're on the government side or on the industry side, or perhaps somewhere in the middle. If you want to join the conversation tonight and you feel like tweeting, my Twitter handle is just my name, @JoshLinkner. So you might be thinking, okay, we're here talking about very important things, and how does this innovation thing apply to me? Perhaps I'm a CIO of a governmental agency. Perhaps I'm in procurement or a non-creative function. I would argue, though, that, well, actually, I'm glad you said that, because to me, all of us are creatives. In other words, it doesn't matter what our job title may be. You can have a very rigid job title or a very creative one. It has nothing to do with our ability to inject creativity into our work. So anyway, how does innovation apply to me, you might be wondering? That is, to me, the opportunity that each of us have to elevate, to lead, to soar. In other words, when you think about it, the one thing that can't be outsourced or automated is human creativity, regardless of our job function. And if we can tap into that natural resource of ourselves and those around us, to me it unshackles the obstacles that we have. It allows us to make an even bigger impact on all those that we serve. Now there's this notion of innovation being this big, scary, overwhelming thing. We think of innovation like inventing the light bulb or the automobile. But in that context, maybe it doesn't apply in individual cases. I would argue that everyday innovation applies to us all. When I say everyday innovation, I mean the little stuff. Don't worry about the big stuff. I'm talking about how you run your Monday morning meeting, how you engage with a vendor or supplier. Those little things added up as a daily habit can lead to incredible breakthroughs. This is a picture of the company that I built most recently. I started it in 1999, sold it in 2012. And we enjoyed some pretty nice success, but I'll tell you, we had everything going against us. First of all, I'm from Detroit, not exactly the tech hub of our country. Are you a Detroiter, ma'am? All right, awesome. We're gonna have to hook up after this. It's like I'm a proud Detroiter. We're gonna talk about Detroit in a minute. But so I'm from Detroit. I started this little tech company, and we were understaffed, undercapitalized, under-resourced. I'll tell you, we were not the smartest people around. But what allowed us to win is that we injected innovation far beyond the code that we wrote. Innovation applied to every aspect of our professional lives. How we led, how we served, even how we sold. Quick example of that in action. We had the chance to win some business from a very large company called Conagra Foods. You'd probably recognize their brands from the grocery store. So here's what happens. This giant corporation decides to consolidate all of their purchases of the work we did. My company was called ePrize, and we did online promotions. So they decided to consolidate all of their purchases of online promotions to one supplier. We made it to the finals. So here's the scenario. My little company from Detroit, two much larger firms, desperately competing to win this business. The problem is, in this case, the decision maker, the lead buyer, he was really kind of a jerk. Yeah, actually, he was a super jerk. This guy was condescending and arrogant and difficult. I'm sure we've all had people like this in our professional lives. What made it worse is he was dragging the process out. He kept setting a deadline to make a decision, kept blowing every deadline. So now at this point in the process, all three of us just wanted closure. Well, I see him at an industry event, actually kind of like this. And I'm trying everything I know to close the deal. Oh no, nothing's working. He was very dismissive. I see him again at the airport. Turns out this guy and his wife were on the same outbound flight that I was. Well, here's what happens next. I can't even make this up if I tried. The guy gets an upgrade to first class. He's a frequent traveler. Well, being the gentleman that he is, he takes the seat for himself, sends his wife back to coach. Just for the record, if I did that with my wife, Tia, game over. That's not happening. So next what happens? I also got an upgrade. I'm a frequent traveler, and sure enough, I got the seat next to him. So I walk on the plane, he's already sitting down, and I'm looking at that open seat. My mind is racing. Think what you'd be feeling. Your instincts would be saying, you're going to close this guy right now. You've got 2 hours of selling time. He's not getting off this plane. And that's what my instincts were saying as well. But then I paused. In the same way, I want to encourage you to pause. When you're facing an opportunity, a challenge, even a threat, those pauses give us a chance to express a little creativity, to take an innovative approach to an everyday situation. I walked on, I said, hey man, I have the seat next to you. The guy looks up at me, cool, we could chat. I said, I'd love that. Only problem is I have a ton of work I got to catch up on. Also, I noticed your wife is sitting in back. How about we switch seats? You two can enjoy some family time. I'll get my work done back in coach. He thanked me, but I saw a little something change in his eyes. Anyway, I walked back and I found his wife. I presented her my first class ticket. I said, go sit with your husband, have a nice flight. And I'll tell you, she got like a little teared up. She says, thank you so much. This means the world to me. I'm so happy to be sitting with my husband. I don't know why. I was seriously expecting her to say, no, really, you keep the ticket. Anyway, the flight takes off. I don't think too much about it until we land. The first thing all of us do when we land, we check our mobile device. Well, I look down at mine and I see an email from my office. Josh, Conagra deal signed. True story. So here's what he later told me. He said, I was looking for a tiebreaker. All three companies were solid, technically proficient, but when you exhibited a little humanity, instead of only lusting after the bottom line, when you demonstrated a willingness to take an unorthodox approach, he said, that's who I wanted to work with. Before the flight took off, he texted into his office. By the time we landed, that deal was inked. This went on to be $30 million in revenue for my little company. It was a game changer. And it happened by taking this innovative approach to an everyday situation, an approach that is accessible to us all. Quick question for you as we consider this bridge between government and industry. 1950, who was the world's largest retailer? Sears? Sears, good. Any other guesses? Kmart, Penny's, Woolworth, good. Macy's. Was that one? Hex, oh, that's a good one. Good guesses. Well, all of these are very good guesses, but let me show you what the actual answer is. 1950, world's largest retailer, A&P. So in 1950, these folks had 16,000 retail stores. They had a 15% share of the US grocery market. They just tripled their revenue in the last decade. But that was the beginning of the end. As their competitors embraced new trends in technology and in customer experience, A&P kept doing things the way they've always done them since 1859. The last A&P closed in 2012. That same 15% share of the US grocery market would be $100 billion in revenue. Now, unfortunately, this pattern is far too common, that once great companies become intoxicated by their own success. They fail to adapt, they fail to innovate, and then they simply fail. And we know the same principle applies not only to industry, but to government as well. While we may not be out of business, there can be a corrosive factor that occurs when we become complacent. Now let's look at the opposite of this scenario. What's going on today? Well, Amazon.com. They currently have almost a $500 billion market cap. And the analysts are saying there's no end in sight. They're saying this is going to be the first trillion-dollar organization. So now why would we think that they won't befall the same fate that A&P suffered? Here's the reason. Amazon continues to inject innovation on a daily basis. They believe in the continuous process of reinvention. They don't wait around for once a decade to do something bold. They do it constantly. And you know they do it with the big stuff. We all know about Amazon Cloud and all that stuff. But the thing I like is they do it with the little stuff too. They're relentless. They're always looking at every single customer touch point and saying, how can we improve? How can we innovate? How can we inject fresh thinking and fresh technology? Leads to the Amazon Dash button. I don't know if you've seen this, it's pretty cool. Here's how it works. Let's say you're doing your laundry. You've been procrastinating, you finally get around to it, you put the clothes in and realize that you're flat out of detergent. What a perfect time to transact. Here's how it works. In this example, it's stuck on your washing machine. You push the button once, connects your home Wi-Fi account, connects to your Amazon account, looks up your most recent order of detergent, ships it to you overnight. Now, not only is it a way better experience, they've totally disrupted the competitive set. 4 days later, when you're at Walmart, you don't need detergent anymore. And by the way, it's not for just detergent. There's a button for everything. Yeah, right there, you gotta have a kid-proof button. You gotta put the button somewhere safe. But the thing is, you're running low on Kraft mac and cheese, there's a button for it. Huggies diapers, there's a button for it. No, seriously, there's a button for like everything. I don't know where you put the button. That's a whole different question. So what else is Amazon doing? As I mentioned, they are applying the same forward-looking approach to all the little stuff. Think about entering your password, and all of us in this room do this all the time. Well, we all know it's easily hacked. Annoying, you forget your password half the time. So Amazon is now experimenting with authentication via selfie. They're able to create a more secure and a better experience for their customers. For all of us tech folks in the room, here's how it works. Ask you to look in your camera on your mobile phone or your computer and do something like blink your left eye. This way they know it's not a static photograph, and they're able to complete a secure transaction. I know this because earlier today, I tried buying $6,000 of gear with this picture. It didn't work. I tried. All right, so we talked about A&P for a little bit. Another question for you, if I may. Which organization do you believe delivers the worst experience? Wow. This is good. So we have a symphony of Comcast and Verizon all approaching. United Airlines? Yeah, they're climbing up in the ranks, I think. DMV? TELUS? So we all have had lousy experiences, obviously, in many of these organizations. But when you look at the list, like the Hall of Shame, of the top 10 worst experiences, at the top of that list every time is the DMV. Now, you know this, if you have to get your tags renewed, you're already preparing for a soul-crushing experience. Unless you happen to be in a little suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina called Holly Springs. You walk into the Holly Springs DMV, the first thing you do is a double take. You're like, wait, time out, am I even in the right spot? Here's why. The first thing you notice, fresh baked cupcakes. So you're munching down some baked goods. Along with that, maybe you'd like a smoothie or a cold-pressed juice. Of course, dozens of varieties of coffees and exotic teas. There's fresh-cut flowers. There's area rugs. There's soft seating. There's a play area to keep the kids entertained. They use technology. You can text your place in line, and it will alert you when it's time to show up, thereby reducing your wait times. All right, what the heck is happening in Holly Springs, North Carolina? Well, here's what's happening. North Carolina decided to privatize the DMV. And a guy named Chad Price raised his hand. Chad says, I'll do it, but only if I can reimagine the experience. Well, as long as he played by the rules, the governmental folks didn't care so much, but his friends were a bit concerned because they said, look, this is a waste. They said, let's think this through. You have a fixed market size. Only so many people live in your geography. They have to come whether they like it or not. You can't change your fee structure. That's mandated by the state. So every ounce of this stuff is a big waste. But Chad had the courage to challenge conventional wisdom. He said, maybe if I created a better experience, I could expand my market size. Maybe it isn't fixed. Today, people drive for up to 100 miles. 100 miles to get to his DMV. They drive right past 5 or 6 others along the way. Because they calculate the round trip time to their home is about the same, but they have a far better experience. So in this example, Chad is delighting his customers, but he's also doing double the throughput, double the revenue of any other DMV in the state. This is what happens even in a restricted, highly regulated environment. If he can do that at the DMV, think what we can do with the resources at our disposal. And I think this is, to a degree, a big wake-up call. Like, hey, even though we work in a governmental agency, perhaps, doesn't mean we have to toss our creativity out the window. It's quite the opposite. Sometimes in the most restrictive environments is the opportunity for us to be the most creative. So here's my challenge to you this evening, folks, no matter what your business card title may say. I really believe that each of us need to embrace an additional role, that of disruptor, or innovator, or artist, or entrepreneur. These are the skills that allow us to win on the industry front in these competitive times and on the governmental front in these turbulent times. And let's face it, the world is changing at a pace like none other in history. Today we live in a world of dizzying speed, exponential complexity, increasing regulatory change. So how do we rise above that? The one thing we know for sure is that we can't simply rely on the models of the past and expect the same results. So it gets back to what I said earlier. It's human creativity, no matter the role that we have in our organizations. That becomes the difference maker. That's what allows us to ultimately make the biggest possible impact. Now the challenge with all this thinking is you say, gosh, that sounds great, but I don't have a game-changing idea. That's okay. Nothing wrong with it if you have one, but don't worry about it. Just block it out for a second. Instead, my suggestion is to embrace the notion of everyday innovation. The little stuff. How you interact with a colleague. How you conduct a job interview. Those little acts of everyday innovation, that's what adds up to greatness. And that is within the reach of each of us in this room. Now, as leaders, we talk about managing change. I think it's a cultural shift that we can embrace. I'm going to give you 2 quick examples of United, embracing this thinking and not. Now, first of all, let's start with the not. We all know about a month or so ago, there was an incident on a United flight. I'm not going to totally rehash it. I think the CEO did step up and take responsibility. But when you really get back to the flaw here, it was a flaw of culture. In other words, the folks in the room, on the plane, they followed the rules exactly. They didn't deviate at all from procedure. But the problem is the procedures were so rigid, they didn't allow any judgment. No one was able to look at the big picture because they were so required to follow every rule to the T. Now, if they were embracing everyday innovation, it would have gone something like this. They would have said, oh man, we got to get someone off this flight. How can we do it? Well, we can use force, but that's probably going to be problematic. I mean, all of us would have thought that would have been problematic. It's not that, it doesn't take that much smarts. Now, someone else, if they were using everyday innovation, though, here's what would have happened. Someone would have been enabled because they would have felt responsible for the outcome, not just the procedure. And they would have done this. They would have gotten on the mic. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Someone on this plane has to get off. I'm really sorry to tell you this. I know it stinks. It's a bummer. We're going to start the bidding at $1,000. Any takers? No? $1,500. All right, $2,500. I'm telling you, by the time they got to $5,000, someone's getting off voluntarily. 100%. We have a volunteer right here. Now compare the economic catastrophe to that $5,000 that would have easily and happily removed someone from the flight to the $1 billion of market value that was depleted in their stock price. So when we use everyday innovation, it allows us to avoid these pitfalls, these catastrophes like that happened with United. So I, on the other hand, let's look at a good side of this. I have a personal example of United where we used everyday innovation. So I'm building my company. As I mentioned, we did online promotions, online sweepstakes, games, loyalty programs. Anyway, we win some business from United Airlines. It was one of our first major brand wins. And we are stoked, like huge company, placing their trust in our little firm from Detroit. So they hired me to build an online sweepstakes. Grand prize, $1 million. And people could enter from a number of different countries around the world that United served. We were responsible not only for the tech, but also the legal stuff, you know, the rules and regulations. So we get into the research after we took the business, and we learned that in Brazil, which had to be an eligible country, a drawing of this nature must be done, according to Brazilian law, on Brazilian soil. So we're thinking, sweet, we're going to Rio. Until we learned that in Australia, which also had to be an eligible country, Australian law governs that drawings like this must be done within the physical boundaries of Australia. Now, this was not a little problem. This was a massive problem. I was a small company. I didn't have an extra $1 million laying around to give away 2 prizes. I'm not about to run an illegal contest. And I didn't want to have to go back to my big new client and tell them we're too stupid to take your business. The answer did not come from me as the CEO. I wasn't smart enough. Didn't come from anyone with a fancy title, in fact. It came from an individual team contributor in my legal department. Her idea, I'm not kidding, saved my company. She comes to me and she says, Josh, which we did. She said, do the drawing at the Brazilian embassy in Australia. Think about it. Technically Brazilian soil, technically in the boundaries of Australia. Saved my company. But as we think about for ourselves this notion of managing change, here's what we can do as leaders. The only thing I did in this case as a leader is I created a safe environment where all ideas were celebrated. Good ones, bad ones, crazy ones. So she didn't have to muster up all this courage. She knew she wasn't going to get yelled at. All I did as a leader is I removed the fear. For you, if you can remove the fear for yourself and those around you, you tap into this vein of creativity that becomes unstoppable. So as mentioned, I've now had the privilege to write 3 books on this topic of innovative thinking, various approaches to kind of hyper-growth leadership. And in doing the research, I interviewed hundreds of people. I interviewed CEOs, billionaires, very senior governmental officials. But I also interviewed artists, musicians, and teachers and hackers. Pretty cool thing. Across all these ages and industries and geographies, it turns out there are some very common patterns. Common approaches of the most innovative people, the most innovative organizations. And that's what I'm excited to share with you this evening. 5 big ideas, the 5 obsessions of innovators. I would encourage you to take an open mind, perhaps more importantly, an open heart, and think how you can inject each of these principles directly into your daily work, whichever side of the government industry fence that you happen to fall. So let's dive in. The first obsession of innovators, it's around curiosity. It turns out the more curious you are, the more creative you become. That sounds good in theory, but how do we do that from a practical standpoint? It really gets back to the pause I had on that airplane. Too often we make decisions instinctively, big and small, based on what worked or what didn't work in the past. If we lived in a static world, awesome. But today we live in unprecedented times, unprecedented change. So those instincts can be misleading. Instead, any chance you get to pause before you make a decision and ask questions, it helps you unleash new possibilities. And ideally, questions that start with why. What if? Why not? The thing is, when you ask these questions, it forces you to challenge conventional wisdom. It forces you to imagine what can be, instead of only what is. And that's exactly what happened with a woman named Jessica Matthews. Jessica was born in Nigeria. She comes to the United States to attend college. She went back to her hometown for her aunt's wedding. They're having a nice time at the wedding, everything's going fine, until the power goes out. A common occurrence, not only in Nigeria, but in many developing countries. You have an old school, antiquated power system, can't keep up with current demand. So what do? They do what they've always done. They fire up the diesel generators. Well, the party continues, but now Jessica and the other guests are breathing in these exhaust fumes. And as her lungs are burning and she's choking, she says, gosh, there has to be a better way. Why? What if? Why not? She didn't have enough money to go rebuild the power grid, so she had to direct her curiosity to finding a clean, free, renewable source of energy. She didn't even have an idea in mind, but she let that curiosity drive her forward. Next day, she's watching some kids playing football. She says to herself, because her curiosity now is on high alert, wow, if I could capture the energy on that field, I bet I could power this whole town. Leads to an invention, the socket. The socket looks and plays just like a regular soccer ball, but inside it's a generator being fueled with kinetic motion. That's a fancy way of saying 1 hour on the soccer field powers a light bulb for 8 hours. Cool. But here's the part I like. She doesn't stop there. Her curiosity persists. Why? What if? Why not? Where else can I apply this thinking? Her next invention, jump a little rope, charge your mobile device. So Jessica now launches a company using motion to create electrical current. Now she licenses her technology to third-party manufacturers. For example, a luggage company. Let's say you're pulling your roller bag through the airport, and as those wheels are turning, it can be creating a clean, free, renewable source of power. Jessica is not only making a real difference in the world, she's created an amazing company for herself. That's the power of curiosity in action. So now that your curiosity is a bit piqued, another question for you. What do you think this is a picture of? What would you guess? Atrium of an office building? Cruise ship? Could be a hospital. Could be like a college or university campus. Government building, good. Well, what it actually is a hospital. But there's an interesting story behind it. So in my hometown of Detroit, there's a 100-year-old hospital, downtown Detroit, called Henry Ford Hospital. This place is like right out of the movies. It is old school. Low ceilings, white tile walls, dingy and smelly. It is pretty gross. But they decided to open up a brand new hospital in the surrounding suburbs. But instead of replicating the old one, they said, let's go do something different. Let's create the un-hospital. So they let their curiosity drive the way. They started asking all these questions. Why do hospitals so much focused on sickness? What if ours was focused on wellness? What if we created a hospital around hospitality? So they broke every rule. Instead of hiring a CEO from the healthcare field, they hired an executive from the Ritz-Carlton company. Completely upended every aspect of the hospital. So today in West Bloomfield, Michigan, you go to this hospital that doesn't look, act, or smell a thing like a regular hospital. Instead of low ceilings, soaring ceilings. There's a little boulevard with shops. There's like an aromatherapy store, a yoga studio. The hospital rooms are wood paneled. They look like a hotel suite. In fact, this is the food you get in your hospital room. The food is so good, sometimes people in the local community will come for dinner. Now, the critics told them, can't be done. They said, you're going to blow your cost structure out of the water. This is going to be an economic catastrophe. But their curiosity led to a different conclusion. Their conclusion is this: God forbid if you're in an accident, you choose your healthcare facility based on proximity. But if you're going to give childbirth or have an expensive elective procedure, you want to go to the gross, old, dingy hospital or the beautiful one with fresh salmon? Today, they're in the top 5 revenue per square foot of any healthcare facility in North America. So this is what happens when we get curious, when we challenge those underlying assumptions. The thing I like about it, too, is they did it with the little stuff as much as the big stuff. They looked around that whole hospital. They said, what else needs to change? Well, how about this? Why must a hospital gown look this way? Well, you have to have access to the patient. Well, most of us I know are in technology. They use a groundbreaking technology to fix this. They use this cutting-edge technology called Velcro. Plenty of access to the patient, but now you have an experience with dignity and a better view for the healthcare professionals. Curiosity in action. Just one more quick healthcare example, because I know it's very similar because of such a heavy regulatory burden and so many complex people in the system that it's very similar in many cases to governmental work. Here's one for you. Children's Hospital, University of Pittsburgh. Who are their customers? sick kids and their families. The leaders of this hospital wanted to create a better experience for those customers. How do they do it? These are the window washers. So here's what happens. The idea comes forward. They called up the window cleaning company, who happily paid for the uniforms. The cost to the hospital was zero. No productivity was lost. They had to clean the windows anyway. But now, as they repel from the roof, they're entertaining the kids. It's a game changer. Kids look forward to it for days. Takes the attention away from the medical care. So in this example, everybody wins. It's better for the kids, obviously. Better for the hospital, who is now better serving their community. It's even better for the window washers. Before, they were doing a pretty boring job, and now they found purpose and meaning to their work. I know we're in highly restricted environments and budget constraints and all that, but this is what happens when we embrace curiosity, when we embrace everyday innovation. All right, so this brings us to our second obsession of innovators. This next one, it's a craving. It's an insatiable appetite for what's next. It's a future orientation combined with a willingness to let go. Letting go of previously held notions or even successes. Letting go of what is in favor of what can be. And I know that takes some courage, but I'll tell you something. Too often, we overestimate the risk of trying something new, but we underestimate the risk of standing still. One of my favorite comedians is Louis C.K. He does something pretty cool. Every year, he throws away all of his old material. So even if you saw him perform to a standing ovation, he'll never do it again. His thinking is that by starting with a blank page, it forces him to remain fresh and relevant and creative, rather than becoming stale or complacent. Now, for all of us in technology, software companies are great at this. Version 5.0 puts version 4.0 out of business. And there's even a term for it, planned obsolescence. Here's my question. Why don't we bring that same blank page to all aspects of our professional lives? There's a lot of magic in that blank page if we're willing to bring it to the surface. Fun example of that for you. What's next thinking in action? Idea Bank is a little bank in Poland. Well, they had an insight that often their customers didn't even have time to get to an ATM machine. So they said, what if we had an ATM machine that could come to the customer? And here's what they did. So they modified these electric vehicles, and they allow customers to order that car with an Uber-like app. So you order your ATM, you track it on the map on your phone, car drives up, transact your business, car drives off. Cool, right? I know. I mean, come on. If you live in that town in Poland, which bank do you want to go to? But here's the part I like about this example. They didn't get that idea by studying other banks. They got the idea by looking at the success that Uber and Lyft were having with on-demand rides. They took the idea, borrowed it, and applied it to retail banking. So for you, and that's to me the whole nature of this conference, is borrowing ideas. If you're on the government side, borrowing from industry or things outside of your field. You could borrow from sports or nature. And if we're on the industry side, maybe there's some things we can borrow from folks outside of our industry. It's a pretty powerful thing when you think about it. And here's the way to do it. If you're facing a problem, ask yourself, where else in the world is a similar problem being solved? For example, if you're trying to process data in and out of a data warehouse, you might say, well, how do people get on and off of cruise ships? How do they load and unload quickly? Maybe I could borrow a premise from it and apply it to my data warehouse. The borrowed idea. So as mentioned earlier, I'm from the city of Detroit. It looks like we have one other Detroiter here. Any other Detroiters in the room? All right, we got a couple. Anyone been to Detroit? All right. Anyone want to go to Detroit? Good, good, I hope so. Well, I'll tell you, Detroit is a fascinating example of, frankly, what happens when you crave what's next and what happens when you don't. 100 years ago, Detroit was the Silicon Valley of our country, wasn't it? That's where people would come to build great companies and ideas and technologies. And when we were in that groove, our city prospered. But then what happened? We did a 180. Instead of creating cool new cars, we started administering automotive corporations. We thought we were entitled to our success, that it would last forever. We built stifling bureaucracies and got involved in finger pointing and blame and protectionism. And the problems that you've seen about, you read about, those came as a byproduct of us being entrenched in the past. You name a problem, we've had it, from dwindling tax base to racial divisiveness and everywhere in between. Yeah, we had a lot of problem with some corruption, you're right. Well, today, and my friends from Detroit will tell you, something magical is happening. Our once broken city is now rising from the ashes. And I truly believe that this 5-year stretch will be studied for decades to come as one of the greatest turnaround stories in American history. And I believe the reason that that's happening, finally, is that we are finally getting away from creating the old Detroit and trying to create a new one. We're finally craving what's next. Personal example. My partners and I got sick and tired of looking at this. And rather than leaving, because we all had plenty of chance to leave, we said, no, we're going to stay. We're going to stay in our hometown. This is a city with a soul, and someone's got to do something about it. So we decided to do something that was really non-traditional. Instead of doing what everyone else had done that didn't work out, we said, what if we started a venture capital fund? Not investing in manufacturing firms, but backing tech entrepreneurs, mobile apps, e-commerce, Internet of Things. People thought we're crazy. You can't do this. Go to Silicon Valley. Go to New York. So that fired us up all the more. So in 2010, we take over this building, downtown Detroit. It had been vacant for 15 years. We raised a $60 million fund. More than half of it was our own money. And decided to invest in entrepreneurs. Yeah, we said we might make some money, but more importantly, we might make a difference. So we take over this building, and we decided to make it a really special place, a place that people wanted to come and create, a place that fostered creativity instead of restricted it. We built an open area for networking functions. We built a rooftop deck so people could enjoy the skyline rather than complain about it. We built an amphitheater for learning and demonstration days. So here's the result. When we started this company, when we opened our venture fund in 2010, there was not one tech startup in all of downtown Detroit. Think about that. Major U.S. city, not a single tech startup. Today, within 1 square block of our building, there are 70 tech companies. There's over thank you. Thank you. There's over 1,000 creative, technical, entrepreneurial folks living in downtown, eating in local restaurants, working in these companies. These 4 guys we funded, just the 4 of them, Detroit Labs. Today they employ 150 people in downtown Detroit. Now, by the way, I'm no way taking credit for Detroit's turnaround. I'm playing a teeny role in a much bigger thing. There are many people doing way more important work than me. I'm just showing you one example of a little what's next thinking in action. And if we can do that and affect our community in that big of a way, think what you can do with the resources at your disposal. As I was preparing for today, one of the questions that I was asked is, can you touch on things that we can do to build cultures that reinforces creative thinking, especially in what are ordinarily more restricted or bureaucratic environments? To me, what I would say is this. If we're all tech folks, we think about our OS, our operating system. The operating system of an organization, government or industry, is culture. And as leaders, we are the ones in charge of that culture. It gets back to creating a safe environment. If we want our people to be creative, if we want everyone to play in the game of innovation, there can't be the fear that exists today. That is the poisonous force that robs us of our best thinking. It's not natural talent, it's fear. Research is crystal clear that all of us as human beings have enormous creative capacity. So our job as leaders is to harness it. A couple fun examples for you from my research. One of the companies that I interviewed issues every year a Failure of the Year award. So they have this big banquet, and they celebrate other stuff like the Team Member of the Year, but they also celebrate the Failure of the Year. This goes for the team or individual that had a great idea. Their numbers made sense, they went for it, it didn't work out at all. But instead of getting fired or getting sent to timeout, they get a standing ovation. People are clapping, cheering, slapping high five. Way to fail. Now, I'm not encouraging us to aim for failure, obviously, but think about the message that that drives deep into the DNA of that company, about taking responsible risks, about the importance of the imagination. Another company that I interviewed issues every team member 2 corporate get-out-of-jail-free cards each year. Here's what they say. They say, go out on a limb, try crazy stuff, and if you really screw something up, hand us a card, you're off the hook, no questions asked. On the annual reviews, a leader will be disappointed with a team member if they haven't used both of them. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, it feels so risky. Perhaps, but let me challenge you for a second. What's the risk of not doing something like this? Mediocrity? Complacency? Getting passed by? I mean, too many of us live our lives trying to play it safe, only to discover that playing it safe, that's the riskiest thing we can possibly do. So as leaders, if we can build a culture that supports this type of thinking with rituals and rewards and reinforcements, then we start to liberate the innovation in our teams. Okay, so this brings us to our third obsession for the evening. And obsession number 3 is around defiance. I say this with great respect. There are many traditions that can and should be upheld. Family traditions or religious traditions, heck, college game day traditions. Here's the problem. Traditions in our professional lives can be deadly. When we find ourselves blindly saluting the flag of the past, I mean, that's been the beginning of the end for far too many organizations, far too many careers. Instead, we got to look at those traditions square in the eye and ask ourselves, what would happen if we defied them? I learned recently that cycle racing is a field with many traditions, also a lot of rules. You can't just grab your Huffy and go ride it in the Tour de France. But I want to show you what happened when a bike manufacturer named Specialized decided, instead of complying, when they decided to defy those traditions.
The bicycle is the most efficient machine known to man. And with modern technology now, it's a great time to really take advantage of the great innovations in the bike industry.
So when we designed the race bike, there's a lot of considerations that we put into it. But just like pretty much every other racing that's out there, including F1 or NASCAR, there's a governing body. For cycling, that governing body is the UCI. And so UCI has a rule book that defines limitations on what we can do with bike design. But we always get the question, hey, if you don't have any rules, what could you do? Robert, our creative designer, went out and created this new concept bike, which he jokingly calls the FUCI bike, which of course stands for the UCI.
It's done in tongue in cheek, but I've always felt that we need to break out of that box in a very fun and decisive way, challenging what a real bicycle looks like.
So yeah, they created the FUCI bike. Here's what they did. They made a list of each and every rule, and next to each rule they said, what's the opposite? For example, tires must be the same size. Well, here the back one's larger to create more traction. The rules say no engines on board. This one's got a little motor in the crank to give you a boost when you're going up hills. Systematically, one by one, they defied each and every tradition and yielded a better outcome. What would happen if you made a list like that? You might find some traditions that are worth keeping. If it's still optimized, keep it. Don't change just for the sake of it. But you might find one or two that by flipping them upside down, you uncover something pretty special. And here's a good way to remember it from a technique perspective. When you find yourself about to do something in a traditional way, ask instead if you can judo flip it. Judo flip that tradition upside down to come up with a better idea. Judo flip the tradition. Judo flip an opportunity. Judo flip a threat. Judo flip a challenge. That oppositional view can lead to incredible outcomes. Example of that, also another one real quickly in aviation. Now we know that the experience on most commercial airlines today is about the same. Like you hardly remember which airline you're on half the time. Unless you happen to be in a little airline in South Africa called Kulula Airlines. You're on Kulula Airlines, you might notice just a slight difference. So here's what happens. The folks at Kulula said, everyone in our industry looks and acts exactly the same. So what if we did the opposite? What if instead of taking ourselves so darn seriously, we became the airline with a personality? Today, there's just no way you can confuse a Delta flight for a Kulula flight. Not only are they having more fun, they're making more money. In an industry that has been through a whole bunch of turmoil, they've enjoyed significant growth year after year after year. This is what happens when we take that defiant approach. Another quick example of this defiance in action. There's a medical device that's used to create vaccines. Obviously, that's an injectable that most of us know about. Well, scientists are now experimenting with this. It basically is like a mushroom. It's a fancy magic mushroom, and they inject certain types of chemicals in there, and so you just inhale it. You like suck out of the magic mushroom, and it avoids the need for getting shots. And by the way, I think this magic mushroom is going to play very, very well in specific demographic areas. One last example of defiant thinking in action. This is a guy named Kevin Bull. Kevin is a financial services guy. But man, Kevin had a dream. Kevin's dream was to become an America Ninja Warrior. Have you seen the show? It is insane. One after another of these incredibly difficult athletic competitions. And the people that get on the show, let alone win, are professional athletes and Olympians, people that trained their whole lives. Kevin sits at a desk all day. But hard work and persistence, he actually makes it onto the show. But then he was facing the challenge of his life. It was a challenge called Cannonball Alley. It involved incredible upper body strength. And there were 16 of the world's finest athletes that all went before him. All 16 failed. Well, now it's Kevin's turn. Come on, what's he going to do? He didn't have the upper body strength of the others that went before him that couldn't make it. He knew a traditional approach was likely going to fail. So he had to become defiant. He had to give it a judo flip. Check out what Kevin did. Isn't that great? Just as his upper body strength is about to give way, flips it upside down, grabs on with his fresh legs, first guy to ever beat the course. That's the thinking that we need in our industry, and that's the thinking we need in government. Which brings us to our fourth obsession. And as a kid who was born in the city of Detroit, this may be my favorite. It's about getting scrappy. Here's what I mean. We often think that we can only innovate if we have a ton of external resources, money or bandwidth or computing power. Truth is, the real ingredients of innovation are internal. Grit, determination, tenacity, resilience, creativity. These instincts, these internal resources that all of us have. We just got to bring them to the surface. And that's how innovators think. It's about doing more with less, getting scrappy instead of relying on external resources. As mentioned, I started my career playing jazz guitar. Obviously a very traditional business background. When I went to college and studied music at college, I had a professor that would force me to remove strings from the instrument. I would have to take off 1, 2, sometimes 3 strings from the guitar. So you immediately figure, okay, your resources have been cut in half. Clearly your creativity is going to crash. But a surprising and counterintuitive thing happened. When those strings were off, I could no longer rely on the patterns that I knew. I had to solve musical problems in a totally different way. And as a result, instead of my creativity suffering, my creativity actually soared. It's this weird counterintuitive thing. But when you're facing the inevitable situation of not enough resources, try doubling down on creativity to get you there. DHL, I'm sure you know, big shipping company. Well, they wanted to get their message out that they were a terrific company, but they couldn't afford to keep up with their competitors in terms of marketing dollars. So instead, they did something pretty scrappy. Check out what they did.
In many countries, DHL has more locations, more vehicles, and more employees. That's why DHL is faster. However, to communicate this with a classic advertising campaign is expensive. So why couldn't the competitors advertise for DHL? For that purpose, giant packages were taped all over with thermoactive foil and cooled down below the freezing point. In this way, the competitors picked up a black package that transformed back at temperatures above freezing and delivered the message in the most beautiful colors to addresses in the city that were not that easy to find. After all, they were paid reasonably. The result, an innovative way to communicate. And everyone played along. Well, almost everyone. Thank you very much.
Isn't that great? So let's think about this. Like, you want to reach millions of people. Option A, take out an ad in the Super Bowl. Starting point, $5 million. Option B, hire some actors and a film crew and ship your packages through your competitors. This isn't about the couple hundred people that saw it live that one day. It's about the 30 million that have seen it online. 30 million people now chuckle when they see that DHL logo. And that's exactly the same way that entrepreneurs and innovators think. And we can think the same way in both industry and government. Oops. So I want to tell you a quick story in terms of scrappy thinking about a man who I've recently gotten to know. He started out, his name was Carlos Sweeney. So Carlos was born in the city of Detroit, unfortunately in a terrible situation. He was abandoned by his parents as an infant. He was raised in foster care, but in abject poverty. He was passed from grade to grade, never learned to read, no support, no real help or anything, and unfortunately he ended up dropping out of school in the 9th grade. With few options, he ended up turning to drugs and gangs and violence. By the time he was 16, he was both shot and stabbed. At age 20, a friend said to him, you know, your life is heading in a bad spot. And all the people you know are in one of two categories. You're either going to end up dead or in jail. And that was the wake-up call that he needed. So at that moment, he said, I'm going to change my life. Now, this wasn't easy because he didn't have a bunch of resources. He didn't have an education, etc. But again, he tackled this through internal resources. He got scrappy. Took him 10 years. He got out of the gangs, off the drugs, became a responsible, legitimate, tax-paying citizen. But then he decided he wanted to give back. Let's think about this. For the success that most of us have in this room and our resources, how much we give back comparatively, this guy's giving, I mean, he's not riding a yacht here. This guy's giving back. So he says, how can I give back? And he realized that as a young man, as a kid, he studied boxing a little bit. And that gave him some strength and discipline. So he, out of nowhere, launches the Downtown Youth Boxing Gym in downtown Detroit. It looks like a boxing gym, but really it's an educational facility masked as an athletic facility. In other words, boxing is the lure to get kids in, but they're not allowed to train in the ring until they spend a couple hours in the back room working with an academic coach, 5, 6, 7 days a week. They're told all these things that they hadn't heard before, like you can do something with your life, like you matter. So he launches this movement, a future worth fighting for, the Downtown Youth Boxing Gym. And here's the results. It starts to take off. Kids come, and they engage not only in the boxing, but in the work with these coaches. The high school graduation rate today, within a 3-mile radius of this gym in downtown Detroit, is an abysmal 37%. The high school graduation rate of the kids that go through that program, 100%. The reason I bring this up is that sometimes, again, we always throw more money and resources at it, but this guy threw something special at it, grit, determination, creativity, and he was able to drive that incredible outcome in obviously as difficult of an environment as urban education. This is the power that's within each of us. We just got to bring it to the surface. All right, our fifth and final obsession for the evening, my friends. This last one is around adapting fast. Too often we think innovation happens like this: single lightning bolt of inspiration, followed by mindless execution. That just ain't the way it works. More often than not, yeah, there might be an initial idea, but usually it's flawed. Only through a series of setbacks and mistakes, pivots, adaptations, micro-innovations, does the idea gain any real merit. So for you, take the weight of the world off your shoulders. You don't have to come in with a game changer tomorrow. Apply your creativity to those fast little bursts, little sprints. It's like we use agile in software development. It's like agile creativity. Fast little rapid fire bursts of creativity can be far more powerful than some giant idea. It's about how quick you respond, not the potency of an initial thought. Los Angeles, California, a billboard goes up. Your move, BMW, the entirely new Audi A4. I think the whole point of this ad, there's just no way BMW could respond to such a cool new car. Only problem for Audi is that BMW is an innovative company. They know how to adapt fast. Within only 1 week, in the identical sight line to this billboard, BMW fired back with this. I'm guessing that's not what Audi was hoping for. But here's a cool thing. Audi is also an innovative company. So instead of crying about it or bringing in their lawyers, 2 days later, very next billboard, Audi responds, "Your pawn is no match for our king." So this launches the billboard wars of LA. Both companies kept volleying back and forth, kept running more and more billboards, trying to outdo one another. And frankly, both companies won because they both knew how to adapt fast. It did get a little weird after a while. You know, at the end of the day, Audi wins. Here's why. The last series of billboards that were created didn't come from their ad agency. They came from their customers. Audi had the smarts to open it up on social media, and thousands of ideas flooded in via Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, many of which turned into real billboards. Think about how powerful that is. Customers writing their ads. Thing is, that's not what they set out to do. They did something totally different that backfired. But because they applied this adapt fast creativity, they were able to flip a tragedy into a triumph. One final story for you this evening that I believe embodies all 5 of these core principles. This is a gentleman named Tom Lix. He spells it L-I-X. So Tom here, he's an entrepreneur. He started a business. He raised some money. He went for it, and it totally crashed. He lost everything. Every penny of his investors' money, gone. His own personal wealth, wiped out. Tom was about to lose his house. Imagine how you would feel. And he was feeling that sting. He was feeling ashamed and hopeless and depressed. But instead of hiding for the rest of his career, he starts reflecting on life, on opportunity, on creativity, and he says to himself, "No, I'm not going to do that." He says, "I'm an innovator." P.S., we're all innovators. Anyway, Tom says, "I'm going to pursue a passion of mine." In this case, he was very passionate about fine whiskey. So he says, "I'm going to start a whiskey company." Well, that sounded good until he ran into a massive brick wall. Turns out, to make a good whiskey, you have to age it in charred oak wood barrels for a decade or more. Tom didn't have a decade. He was about to lose his house. So he had to deploy these 5 obsessions of innovators. First, he got curious. He started asking endless questions about the manufacturing process, raw materials, distribution. He had to crave what's next, a whole new kind of company. He had to defy tradition. The traditional approach wouldn't work in his case. He had to get scrappy. He was nearly out of resources. And he had to adapt fast. Time was not on his side. So he's brainstorming, he's getting in the groove, he's creating stuff, he's all reflective, and it finally comes to him as a judo flip, which we spoke of earlier. Tom says, "I know, instead of putting the whiskey in those barrels, What if I put the barrels in the whiskey? And here's what he does. He takes these big stainless steel tanks. He puts the raw whiskey in, then he chops up pieces of barrel wood, tosses it in with the whiskey. Next, he applies pressure. It turns out that wood is absorbent, like a sponge. So when he applies pressure, soaks up the liquid. Release the pressure, well, that liquid comes back out, but it picks up the flavor of the wood. So Tom puts the whiskey and the wood in the tank, applies pressure, releases it, applies it, releases it, 24/7. As a result, it doesn't take him a decade to make good whiskey. It doesn't take him 5 years, doesn't take him 1 year. He produces his in 1 week. Okay, come on, cool production innovation, but obviously he's got to hide that. Who's going to drink aged in stainless steel 1 week whiskey? Ugh. He doesn't hide it at all. He screams it from the mountaintops. He tells everyone he makes it in a week. He taunts his competition. He says, why are you wasting a decade? I make a better damn whiskey in 1 week. So Tom is provocative. He's pushing the boundaries in every aspect of his business, even his name of his company. Instead of calling it something generic like Kentucky bourbon, Tom proudly calls his Cleveland whiskey, his hometown. So you might say to yourself, okay, the guy's making it in Cleveland. He's making it in 1 week. It's got to be the discount whiskey. Oh, no. Tom here is charging a 30% premium to the leading brand. Instead of the cheapest, he's the most expensive. How's that working out? Well, Tom can't make this stuff fast enough, even in 1 week, running 3 shifts a day to keep up with demand. It's one of the hottest whiskey brands out there. It's flying off the shelves. He's got a growing, successful business, and even managed to snag a few famous customers. This is what Tom did in his darkest hour. Think what we can do in our finest. So I'd like to leave you with a quick resource. If you'd like links to these videos, a quick summary of the 5 obsessions, if you're interested in signing up for my free weekly blog, all this is free, by the way, no fees, but I built this for you. So go to joshlinkner.com/go. Password, of course, ACT-IAC with a dash in the middle. And it's a good way to snap a picture. I think these resources will be helpful to you as you continue to embrace your own innovative and creative journey. And finally, as we wrap up, I would just like to do this. I'd like to pass the baton back to you. Here's the problem. You come to an amazing event like this, you're hanging out with colleagues and peers, you're fired up, then you go back to your office and you have 800 unread emails. So how do you bring it back? And how do you put it into practice? Here's my suggestion. While these ideas are still fresh in your mind, in the next 7 days, see if you can uncover one single idea for creative disruption. It doesn't have to be big, it can be teeny. And you don't have to fund it or get permission, just think of it. Here's what's going to happen. Ideas are contagious. One idea becomes 6 ideas, becomes 11 ideas, becomes 28 ideas. And this new creative groove will spill over to those around you. If you start with that one idea in the next 7 days and fast forward 90 days from now, you're going to be enjoying tremendous progress. The world we're living in today is difficult and complex. The stakes have never been higher. The challenges have never been greater. The speed has never been faster. But I really believe the opportunity has never been more profound. So let's seize it. Now is the time. Now is the time to inject some innovation into our work. Now is the time to bring creativity to the surface, to defy traditions, to push the boundaries. And if we can do that in partnership, government and industry, fellow Americans, that's going to allow us to continue to elevate our game and to continue to create a great country together. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you.
Let's thank Josh Linkner one more time for his innovative remarks. I mentioned the MOC app earlier, and in the spirit of innovation and adaptive thinking, why don't we use the MOC app to capture some creative, disruptive ideas over the next 3 days, not just the aha moments and what comes out of our sessions, but why not use it for these great ideas that Josh is challenging us to come up with. Over the next 2 days, we have an exciting program planned. Tomorrow, we're going to begin with a buffet breakfast starting at 7 a.m., and our plenary sessions will be right here in this ballroom promptly at 8:15. We're going to require everyone to wear their name badges to gain access to the session. So with that, we want to bring tonight's program to a close. We're going to have a networking event now on the Manor Lawn. ACT-IAC staff are going to be outside to guide us to the event. I hope you can all join us. I look forward to continuing the dialogue for the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.